Good evening. Welcome to the closed session of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2017. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll. Vice President Natoli?
Present.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Deppie?
Here.
Director Hasai will be joining us later in closed session. Are there any public comments on items appearing on the closed session agenda? As there are none, we will adjourn. We will be back at 7 o'clock for a reception to honor our community volunteers. Okay. Hi, thanks for coming. We are so delighted. You're all welcome to come closer. This is really friendly, and do I need to go closer to the mic? This is really friendly, because I'm going to make you come up, or at least stand up, and I was hoping you'd come up, but okay. So, I want to welcome you. You are truly the 1%. Might be the only time we get to be part of the 1%, but here you are, so congratulations. Yes, you are the 1% of Kensington that values involvement in local issues and government with a willingness to roll up your sleeves and work. The KPPCSD board is so deeply grateful for your time, your intelligent reflection, and the use of your skills to make our district better. How have you made the KPPCSD better in the last year? I just thought you'd like to consider these accomplishments. We divided the positions of GM and Chief of Police and hired or promoted outstanding individuals to fill those roles. We have the first independent GM in the history of Kensington. We will have the first Chief of Police to complete a calendar year of service since 2014. We will have a new dispatch center that provides better reporting. We've hired a terrific new general counsel who has brought us reduced cost with a dramatic increase in professionalism and accountability. We have hired 2 consultants to begin studies of our administrative function and our police department so that we can offer our employees and the community an operation that is responsive and reliable as any agency in existence. None of this could have been done by the board without your analysis and assistance, but what you've done individually and as committees far exceeds these humble achievements. So we'd like to recognize you individually and as groups. Under special contributions, we want to recognize Michelle Zatkoff, who's not here this evening. Michelle is a graphic designer who was a Kensington resident, now lives in Albany, and has created the new logo that you'll see this evening on the cake, and soon in future on our new website. Camden Richards is a graphic designer, also lives in Kensington, and she prepared all the artwork that appears on the cards that you've seen that are raising money for the community center. And Josh Dickinson donated the cost of producing those cards. David Bergen, you have seen often. You want to stand up, Mr. Bergen? Yay! Has made these meetings hum along and has served, you'll see, on many committees throughout this year. Dr. A. Stevens Delk has helped us fine-tune our policy and procedures and has kept our noses to the grindstone in a good way. Dr. David Spath also has provided significant meeting assistance and always come through when needed, so we so appreciate him. Mr. Braffman has kept us on park maintenance, but he, along with Kim Zwick and Dr. Spath, ran for our vacant seat, and we couldn't appreciate that commitment and that willingness to put themselves out there more than we can say. So thank you to all those outstanding individual volunteers. So on to solid waste. I'm sorry, there's really no rhyme and reason for the way you're listed in the program. So forgive me for that. The Solid Waste Committee, and if you were here, you're welcome to come up. Lisa Cole, A. Stevens Delk, Mary Korn, Anthony Knight, and Mark Wagner, with additional help provided by Lisa Corona, Gail Feldman, Kathy Stein, and Ciara Wood. Anyone? So,
Ciara, you helped with the trails and the garbage cans.
yes. The Solid Waste Committee examined the solid waste contract, possibly restarted our hazardous waste program, or fingers crossed, clarified our franchise fee schedule, searched for new places to place receptacles, placed garbage cans, made sure that disposal could be done in an attractive and aesthetically appropriate container, toured county facilities, and acted as facilitators for all Kensington residents in securing the best access to unlimited green waste, possible future food composting, and backyard pickup. So they tremendously restarted this program along with Vice President Natoli, and we couldn't thank you enough for bringing this issue to the forefront because we let it kind of lag behind for too long. So thank you very much for that committee. The Technology Committee, David Bergen, Simon Brathman, A. Stevens Delk, formerly Chris Deppy, and Dory Oren, with David Spath as well. You have brought us operational microphones, Wi-Fi and hearing assistance, recorded meetings, consistently recorded meetings, let me say, searchable documents, and coming soon in January, a brand new, fantastic website. So thank you. I mean, the technology it's a huge improvement, something we lagged far behind, and we are so excited to see what the future brings. So thank you. Park Grounds, Director Welsh, do you want to speak about Park Grounds?
Sure. This is a project that's gone on for well over 2 years. 3, maybe? Katie and Peter? 4? Time flies and you're having fun. So you all may remember that when we started out, we were trying to make the park and this building and the other buildings in the park as fire safe as we possibly could. We had wonderful expertise donated by Charlie Danielson and Dan O'Brien, who's no longer in California. So we have a list of volunteers here, which is not complete, and I apologize for that. Peter Liddell is also on it. Mabry Benson, I think, made a few appearances. Katie Gluck, of course. I said Peter Liddell. Lisa Corona is not on this list, and she should be. And I think it's 2 N's, by the way, for her last name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Gretchen Gilfillan also was a real trooper helping out. Peter, Katie, remember anybody else? Oh, Paul. Very good, thank you. Yeah, there were a couple of folks who showed up now and then, like me, but I hurt my back, so I had an excuse to not show up anymore. So anyway, it was a wonderful thing that's been done. The park in general is a lot more fire safe than it was, and we were very lucky to have the expertise of both Charlie and Dan. And I hope the work will continue. It's stuff keeps growing back, and we have to stay on top of it.
No, thank you so much. I know it's not always the easiest, and you always don't have the number of volunteers that you would hope for, but thank you for being willing to show up and let us know what was working correctly and what was not. We will make those corrections, and the corrected document will be on the website, and I apologize for misspellings or anyone that's missing off these lists. Park planning. Park planning has done a tremendous amount of work this year. Paula Black, Peter Conrad, Gretchen Gilfillan, Katie Gluck, Todd Hodson, Ciara Wood, with the additional aid of Ann Forrest and the KCC board, and Lisa Corona and the KIC board. They have completed, reading the list of work they've done this year is exhausting. They've hired an RFP for hiring an architectural firm. listened to 5 proposals, recommended a firm, approved design features, solicited funds, examined budgeting, and kept the general community involved and informed. So we're excited this year. We hope that we'll complete renovations on this building, or at least get a good crack at them going. And so it'll be more work for you. So stick around. I hope you'll stay and stick around. So those planning park grounds members want to stand up and be acknowledged. We're totally happy for you to do so. Yay, Katie. Now moving on to finance. I think that the Finance Committee, when we finish, will have an operational model that will rival NASA when we're done, I think, diligently, doggedly, you've pursued accountability, pun intended, and fiscal responsibility, made sure that OPEB, PERS, and legal fees were above board. And I'm so grateful for your time commitment and your surprising lack of shyness in pointing out fiscal errors. So huge thanks to Rob Furman, Paul Haxo, Carl Kruger, Lori Trevino, Jim Watt, with Gail Feldman participated and gave us lots of statistical analysis, and Linda Lipscomb generously donated her time and expertise in going to the county and giving us projections for home sales that will help us improve our modeling. So thank you to all of you. Then if I'll speed it up so we can get to cake, I know. Emergency Services Committee was Maya Churi, Paul Doro, Derek Suring, with Paul Moss providing us wonderful information concerning Nixle, and Larry Nagel, often representing the Kensington Fire Protection District. And they worked very hard. Hard to even get our attention. We were having such a busy year, so I appreciate that sometimes emergency services did not move to the top of the list. And so they kept coming back and saying, when is this happening? Where is this happening? And we appreciate that. They connected us, tried to get us connected with CERT and Nixle and other special districts to have us adopt preventative measures so that we can keep all of Kensington safe. And you will be a huge priority in the coming year because, unfortunately, we all know that emergency services are so very, it's clearly the heart of our organization, our special district, but it also is how we're going to be safe in the future. So thank you so much for Emergency Services Group. Policy and procedures. This group really tried to get going. And we have been working on the CSDA model. You'll see something on our agenda tonight talking about our policy and procedure manual. It will also be coming more in hand in the coming year. But A. Stevens Delk and Barbara Diltz helped Vice President Natoli, and Marilyn Stolen did a tremendous amount of research and assistance to try and show us what other districts were doing, which is really very, very helpful, and we appreciate that work. Thank you. Community outreach, Andrew Paul Gutierrez and David Spath, helping us engage with the community. You may have realized that the toolbox of the past was not going to be enough. You're willing letter writers, and on all platforms, I know that these gentlemen were the neighborhood walkers and probably bored their friends at parties with information about our district. So I thank them so very much for keeping the greater community connected, and we want to utilize your skills in the future. So because as much as we like these meetings to be boring, we also like to see lots of folks too. So thank you so much, Dr. Gutierrez and Dr. Spath. Additional assistance was provided by Celia Conkus, Catherine Deniergard, Meldon Heaslip, Len Schwartzbird, and members of the Kensington Fire Protection District. And their commitment is difficult to define, which is why they kind of ended up, unfortunately, in a catch-all. They gave us additional research, artistic design, donated dollars, gave up evenings and weekends for us. And so we just have to say overall for all of you how, again, appreciative. I'm sure I sound really mundane and like I didn't do very well on my SATs, but you all, you publicly answered questions and you still showed up when things didn't go your way. And we could not be more impressed or proud that you are our neighbors. So thank you very much. So, on to cake. Thank you very much.
If it is, I am.
That's right. All right, we'll start. All right, everyone. Okay, record. Here we go. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District Board of Directors. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2017. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll. Director Hasai? Here. Vice President Natoli? Here. Director Welsh?
Here?
Director Debbie?
Here.
So we are all present and correct. And from closed session, all I have to report out is that we gave direction to our labor negotiators. All right, moving into our regular meeting, we'll now take public comments on items not appearing in the agenda. A quick correction, items on the consent calendar, or the consent calendar item, excuse me, should wait until we get to item 7. Any comment?
First of all, thank you all, too. I know how difficult it is to do this kind of work. You're not being paid for it. It's through commitment that you do it. So thank you all, board members, very much. Now, I want to urge you strongly to bargain in good faith with the police union, not to hang there and say, oh, we're going to hang back until we find out what goes on with this committee. You can imagine how difficult it is, and I've been involved in the labor movement in the past for many years, how difficult it is to hold your job during a period when you see instability in the framework that more or less guarantees your job. You can also see how difficult it is to attract people for what used to be a wonderful source of officers for us, and that is an enhanced reserve group. People who become familiar with this town, become familiar with the kind of policing we expect, who come to know our names, who know our tortuous streets, who know whose dog gets off the leash, and that's what the people of Kensington expect. It is very difficult to have people come and serve reserve duty, which is uncompensated, in a situation that is constantly in flux. So I urge you strongly to bargain in good faith, represent us well with the union, but to carry forward and don't string it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Simon Brofman. I, as well, would like to thank the board for this evening and also for the presentations regarding both the renovations on this building and the look at the future police organization. And I'd like to make one comment. I would really like to see residents in Kensington involved in some way on looking at the future of our police services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Just to note, you'll see some changes in our agenda this evening. Yes, Carl? All right. Board member, I will pull off item A because we have some questions about it. And you will see that we have moved items in the past that appeared in the consent calendar into an informational packet that are attached to the agenda. What will occur is these items will not be part of the agenda in the coming agendas but they will appear on our website. It's not what we're trying to do is illustrate that the agenda document pertains generally only to the items being discussed for the meeting. The others are strictly for information. And we will make copies of those available in future along with the agenda during the meeting. All right, so item A is up for discussion. Any board comments? Mr. Kruger, if you would like to come forward and
I have a couple of comments on the financial statements, but Jim Watt sent me an email today, and for whatever reason, he thought I might talk about the financial statements. So he asked me to comment a couple of items that he has. So I will ask those two items first. He wants to know about 564. We had, which is communication. We had expenditures of $34,000 a month. He would like to know if this is going to be our regular monthly charge or not. Because if we were to have those, we would have communication expenses of $400,000 a year, and our budget is about $220,000.
go ahead.
I think, Carl, but I'm not positive, and when Ricky gets back, he can explain it, that may be part of the RIMS invoice. Or here he is.
His question is whether our monthly charges are not going to be $34,000 a month, because that's what we have paid up to now. Our annual budget is only $222,000.
This is an item in the budget.
It's item 560.
564, for those who don't have it in front of them, communications. The annual budget for this year is $222,958. That reflects our change in dispatch provider and software, for the software that we needed to acquire for our new dispatch provider. In November, we were billed $34,051.26. And so that was
But for the 5 months, year to date, we're already at $121,000.
Yes, that's part of the transition to the new software. That's not going to be it's not $34,000 a month.
So the answer is we are not expecting to be paying $34,000.
No, we are not.
Okay. His second question is, there had been an agreement, and I know it was at the Finance Committee, that on item 521T, we had agreed to prepay. Because if we were to prepay the medical trust, we can ultimately save $20,000. And that hasn't been done. What's the reason for not having done that?
We will communicate, I'm not sure if the general manager knows, we will communicate again with Debbie Russell that that payment needs to be made.
It will be made?
Yes.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
we are going
You are
to,
correct, that was agreed to on the Finance Committee side.
By when?
And I'm hoping that it was an error for this document, but if not, we will rectify that.
When does that have to be prepaid by? Do we know? Is there a date?
Typically, what we try and do is pay it in July or August.
Okay.
So the sooner, the better.
okay. As some of you may know, Jim Watt can be very particular, and I would expect him to say, is that the best answer you can get?
It is.
That's the best answer I can get. Okay, I have a number of items, and I will bring them to the next Finance Committee, because there are some detailed kinds of things, and I don't want to take everyone's time. But the two items that I care to speak about is payroll. If you take 502, 504, 506, and 508, we have overspent $44,000 year-to-date. Now, I know that our 502 is a little bit below, and then the overtime is high, and the other things. But that would get us, if we were to continue this, about $105,000 or $106,000 above budget for the year. Besides that, the payroll 808 is also almost $10,000 above budget. So those are pretty big numbers. The one thing that we have done for the last few years, we have not overspent total payroll. Our payroll might have been, our overtime may have been high, but our total payroll was always in line. We need to look at that. That's a fairly good chunk of money.
That is something that the board has been concerned with, and we are following up with staff.
My final item is 972, which is park building improvement. Where are we on that schedule of payment? We have paid very little to date. Is this because we have done less than what we expected, or we haven't been billed?
No, we've been paying and billed, and I think we just got the latest bill. At the end of each phase, we've been getting billed. So that is, as far as Glass Associates goes, the money in there is also for the actual construction.
Understand.
Right, and that is obviously not being spent
So
yet.
scheduling-wise, we are not as far as we thought we might be.
We're actually just almost, to this month, we just are beginning to fall behind, where I had hoped that we would be considering the more detailed cost estimates. We'll probably do that next month, but we're not really behind. We put that money in there because we have to show all the dollars committed or in hand before we go to bid in, let's say, February or March. So there's more in there than will be spent because we have to show it to go to bid on a public project.
So we are basically up on payment to what the work that has been done.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other further questions or comments? If there are not, I move that we accept the minutes from November 16th, 2017.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. All right, the motion passes 5-0. We move on to board and staff comments. Do any board members like to say anything? Comments? You know I will. I want to let you know that the KPPCSD is participating in the toy drive being run by the Kensington Fire Protection District, hence the truck below. They have joined with the Marines this year to provide holiday gifts for children. So I believe that that drive runs through Saturday. So please, you're welcome to come to the Public Safety Building and drop off new unwrapped toys for children. I wanted to make a comment. Last month, or I should say our meeting on November 29th, I know we had speaker cards, and I know that I referred to all of you if you spoke, by your last names. I just wanted to let you know, that wasn't because I don't know your names or appreciate you or feel familiarity. It's, we had a guest, and what we are working on is making sure that if we have newcomers, that we're not assuming that they know whom we all are. So that's why we're kind of moving to speaker cards and also to sometimes using your honorifics. Further comments by the General Manager? All right, then we'll move on to old business. We are having our second reading and possible adoption of Ordinance 217-01 that appears on page 22 of the agenda. As you'll remember, last month, we did a first reading of this document, which is a draft encroachment ordinance. We will take public comments on this. Board comments? Seeing as there are none, I make a motion that we hold a reading of the ordinance, which is Exhibit 1, that's 217-01, by moving to read the title only.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. All right, the motion passes 5-0. So we will have a second reading. So the second reading by title only is the Kensington, this is, I make a motion that we adopt the ordinance, the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. This is an ordinance of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District, prohibiting unauthorized encroachments on district land and adopting procedures, penalties, and other remedies for such encroachments.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I'm going to use a roll call vote to see whether we adopt the ordinance. Director Hassai?
Aye.
Vice President Natoli?
Yes.
Director Welsh?
Yes.
Director Debbie?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So the ordinance passes 5-0. Woo! I think our first ordinance of 2017. Thank you.
First ordinance in a very long time, I
That's
think.
right. So this ordinance will be published, and we will be posting it in full at the district offices and at the community center and other prominent places around the district. You will see it within the next 15 days. I'd like to ask that staff see if it can be posted perhaps by the 22nd, just for, and then it will come into effect 30 days from today. All right, now we will move.
Can I suggest that we post the ordinance in the same places that we post the agenda? Thank you.
That will unfortunately not be able to be done because it wouldn't occur in a timely manner. The Outlook, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah, we could put a notification in prominent social media and other places.
I'm sorry, I just wondering, so I'm not sure it belongs where the agendas are. Seems to me there ought to be like a section you can go to in the website that clearly directs you to the ordinances.
She's saying
I'm-
physically to post it around town where we post agendas.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yes. No, we'll have an ordinance category within the website, I think. Well,
There was, it used to be.
there used to be, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
All right, moving on to item 9B, the board will consider appointing an ad hoc steering committee to work with Matrix Consulting Group. This page appears on page 38 of the agenda. And Tony, would you like to introduce this to us?
This item is related to the presentation that was made on Wednesday, November 29th by Matrix Consulting Group, where it was recommended that the board consider a steering committee to work with a consultant and provide feedback during key portions of the evaluation. And the steering committee can include up to 2 board members, and it is recommended that the committee be comprised of 3 total members, including the general manager.
Public comment? All right. I'm happy to take your recommendation. I think that I have full confidence, I want to say, in all the board members in working to be impartial and to ensure that we have the clearest and most concise outcome for the matrix survey. My suggestion was actually going to be that we vote on appointing one board member to work continuously on the project, and my suggestion was going to be that that be Director Hasai, and that perhaps the rest of us who I think all want to have opinions and assurances that the project's going along, that we perhaps step in, each kind of taking a month and provide consultation and an outside viewpoint on the project. I thought that allowed more of us to get involved, and I thought that there were specific areas of interest and guidance. I thought that Director Natoli has a good perspective on how we create community engagement. Len, I think you have a really great insight on finding out how we survey, or how the surveying is going on other agencies, and how we have really high standards, what standards we're comparing in terms of comparing other agencies to our own current police service. And because you have historical knowledge, I think that would be a great, and Chris, I think you have a great insight on how we can communicate the findings to a wider community in terms of using social media and using other tools, communication tools. So those were that was my off-the-cuff idea. You're welcome to disagree with it, or.
I had offered and volunteered to do this because I just really believe that the intent of this exercise, there's no outcome determined. I hope that everyone in this room can at least believe that. And we really are committed to fact-finding and just putting out, what the options are. And there is no predetermined outcome. And I really appreciate Linda's comments about the force. I have been in a situation like they're in now. I was 7.5 months pregnant working for Save the Children, and the great economic crisis hit, and I was laid off, and so I understand uncertainty, and I understand, but I also understand that this is nothing personal. I value every one of the officers. I believe that everybody is doing their best for Kensington, and I just think we are looking at it, our responsibility is to look at this structurally for now and going into the future, and there is no, intent or predetermined outcome here, and I'm very committed to that, and I'm very detail-oriented. I really I've done a lot of projects, and I'm good at keeping the big picture in mind, but also not drilling down on the details. So I offered to do this, and I'm happy to do it.
So what do you think?
I'm fine with that. And I had a suggestion. I think we're still meeting every other week or twice a month, and I think it would be really good if we had every meeting an update about how the project is going, so sort of every 2 weeks kind of take stock of where things are in case we need to do a course correction. And I think if we had that, plus your involvement and our rotating, I think we'd be fine, because we could always discuss at the meeting anything that comes up or any problems that occur. So treat it really as a project where you're getting every 2 weeks an update and look at the status to make sure it doesn't go off course, or we don't wait a month to hear about things are going wrong.
So that would be a task that I think that the consultants would have to provide for us, because I think that would be an appropriate bulleted list of here's where we're at, because that's something I don't think we should be responsible for, but I think that they could do as a regular report, very quickly bulleted.
Well, I think I could provide that also. It'd be, and then you would have input into certain sections of it of interest, but it would just be more process updates, not results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it might be results at some point, right? I mean,
At some point, but not every 2
Right.
weeks, yeah.
right. I'm just interested in hearing about progress more often than less often, and if we could have it as maybe something on the consent calendar or a standing item that we always have that we can discuss, that I think that would be good.
Okay. I'm not trying to do anything that would disrupt continuity, but I think that this way that, we make sure that every, I don't see us steering up the project one way or the other. I think we want very valid and open answers, but that we make sure that we're representing a lot of different viewpoints of the community as we go along. So, okay, any other,
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, I think Director Deppie's point also is that it's probably better to over-communicate than under-communicate. And I think there's a tendency in these reports, sometimes no one knows what's going on until there's a major decision, and then everybody asks, how did we get here? And I think the process you're suggesting really cuts down on that possibility.
Right.
I have a question, Rochelle, about your concept of the second board member's involvement. I thought at first you were going to suggest maybe a rotation, rather than sort of a subject matter limitation. And I'm wondering if it ought to be more, if something comes up where subject matter consultation is needed, that seems to be fair game to, for Tony to talk to the appropriate board member, but in terms of the second board member's input, it might be just good to have it like a rotation every month or two.
okay, I'm totally happy with a monthly rotation. I think that's a great idea. So, you want to make the motion? You want to do that? Or do you want me to make the motion?
Why don't you make the motion?
Okay.
I'll second it.
That's fine. I'll make a motion that we adopt, and then we'll take any public comment, of course. A steering committee consisting of General Manager Constantoros and Director Hasai, with the second board member to join on a monthly basis. I think that will work, comprising, January, February, March, and April. That kind of takes the 18 weeks that they thought the project is going to take. And I'm happy to come in there anytime. And I guess order to be decided later. Or should we decide on?
Let me consider the order, because if you do it on a time basis, it could be that nothing happens, let's say, for the first month, and then a lot of things happen in the third month. So maybe as key benchmark dates are arrived at, that's the time maybe to rotate.
All right.
Let me talk to the consultant, and we'll come up with a plan with Director Hasai.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll leave it up to the general manager and the director to decide the rotation schedule.
Yes.
Well, we will suggest that, and the board will make
Good
a
idea.
final decision.
Suggestion will, okay, I second the motion
All right.
with all those caveats.
Any public comments?
Are we not having a member of the community on this?
We are not. The
Well-
committee will be brought into the process in terms of focus groups and probably town halls, but we discussed at the last meeting that as far as the steering committee, choosing a community member would be rather problematic, because we have wonderfully committed and involved community members, and to choose
Possible perceived bias and
Be the
concerns
other.
about that.
I really believe that we need to have someone from the community involved in this from the very beginning, to make sure that the focus shows that the idea is to serve the community, not to serve the board.
I think that the proposal and the intent of the project is very clear, and they were very clear that it's to come up with the best proposal or best analysis for the service for the community. And it's going to be multiple opportunities throughout the process for everyone in the community to be involved, not one or two members. We want everybody to have that influence. So this is really a project management thing. It's really just to keep things moving forward. I don't even know how much of a role really we're going to have. I don't expect to have to do a lot with this group. They are very, very well, focused and experienced. So if they need us for some reason, they're going to come to us, but I don't think we're going to be directing or dictating a whole lot here. I think our goal is to make sure the community involvement happens in the input sections and surveys, whatever, around service levels, and not just one or two members of the community, because that's where the problematic stuff comes.
I don't think that the idea I'm proposing negates more community involvement. I brought up this idea actually at the presentation, and they said other communities had done this, and they thought it was a good idea. So I'm not speaking from a vacuum. So
Could I make a suggestion, Simon? We are going to be reporting in pretty regularly at each of these board meetings, and you'll have the opportunity to cross-examine us, as will everybody else, same way we get cross-examined on the budget and everything else. So I think in terms of, and this is a rather active board commentary dynamic we have going here. So my suggestion would be, we'll be transparent about where we're at. We will be doing the town halls and all that kind of thing, but as we report on where we're at board meetings, you'll have a chance to ask for all the details you want.
to me, that's different. I think that what you're suggesting is a good idea, but I think that's different than community involvement. And I highly suggest that you rethink that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a brief response to what Simon has just said. I think that the discussion the last time also addressed the fact that there are POBOR, the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, and there are certain personnel files that the public really has no, shouldn't be seeing, and that board members may have some knowledge that others wouldn't have, and could provide a certain amount of direction to Matrix when they do their study.
That is correct. And there are other things that we will not be able to see even as board members, of course, that just simply Matrix will be able to look at, or not. So while I appreciate your opinion, Ms. Simon, I respectfully disagree. I think that in order we really have a mandate to do this in a timely manner, given that it is difficult for our staff and difficult for our officers to be going through the process, because it can feel uncertain and unsure, and also that we want, in every regard, to try and assure, if we can, that we are really trying to be very, very neutral about this, and that we are keeping our sticky mitts off any kind of analysis until the project is complete. So I'll now ask for a vote. All in favor?
Yes?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 9C. This appears on page 39. This is a consideration of proposals from Bob Dice and Public Management Group. And Tony, would you like to present this as well?
This item relates to the November 16th meeting where Mr. Dice made a presentation about the district's administrative support services and identified areas where there could be improvements. And there were several areas where the district simply has no staffing or does not do these services. So his proposal is really a three-part proposal. The first part is to look at the positions that his study recommended, come up with job descriptions, come up with a market compensation, and also a cost analysis, and the proposals for $11,115 for that aspect. The second part would be to look at human resource practices and policies and provide training to the staff. We do currently, the district does not have a human resources function. And that proposal is $8,700. And the last one is to update the board's policy and procedures manual. That's one that they proposed on a time and materials basis. And I'm suggesting if the board wants to proceed with that the board set a limit of $10,000 and that assign a board member to work with the general manager on this project. I don't think that this project needs to be as complicated because there are best practices and examples of very good procedures manuals that could cut down on the amount of time necessary and also the amount of work that is required. Also, the procedures manual, even if it's completed to 80%, is still would be improved document than what is currently available, and the last 25 or 20% could be done over a period of time once those lesser priority items are identified. I think that the board should consider doing all three of these studies. Obviously, the personnel one, there is no personnel function. Personnel law changes annually. There's tremendous liability. This is where legal costs get amplified in the budget, and this would eliminate that part of the way the system has worked in the past, because there isn't anybody here professionally that can do that work. And of course, the board is aware of the problems with the current policy manual and the shortcomings. My highest priority is really to get the administrative organization functioning, so that's why I recommended that particular one of the three, but I also think the board should consider the other two aspects.
A couple of questions. On the manual, it's one thing to reorganize the whole thing, and previous boards took a whack at that and didn't get very far because it became such a voluminous project. Now I get that having a consultant do it removes a whole lot of controversy along the way, and you get to a final product for consideration. But I said this before, it seems to me that some things in the manual are a higher priority than others to revise. And what I would like to see is first sort of, picking out the 8 to 10 highest priority items to fix, fixing them with, a review of how they might conflict with other things in the manual, but get that done first. And then we see where we're at that point with cost and time. And then if it looks like it's doable to fix the rest of it with some kind of model, then we do that as a second stage.
We actually have the CSDA model policy and procedure manual, and I think to a large extent, frankly, it would be easier to do the whole policy and procedure manual than to try to work with our existing policy and procedure manual. I favor, though, doing it internally rather than having it be done by a consultant, because we do have the model from CSDA, and I think it would be better if we worked on it ourselves rather than have a consultant working on it.
Well, maybe. There's a lot of stuff in that manual, and the thing is, when you get an off-the-shelf model, there's a tendency sometimes to say, well, that's what we want to do, but you kind of have to go through each thing and harmonize it with the way things have been being done. And
Exactly.
that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but that's why I think it needs to be done internally rather than to have an outside consultant do it that doesn't know how we operate. That's my thought process on it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I don't know. I'm agnostic about it. I just think that I know there's a few things in there now that are really bad and really need to be fixed, and it'd be good to get those fixed. And then, I just see a two-stage process, but that's just the way I view it. Maybe the consultant could do a quick review and make a proposal for how to go about it. I don't know.
I think if we can, in the next 6 weeks, by the end of January, potentially take a look at the CSDA model, because I also kind of favor a wholesale change, because the current model really needs work, and we have this great model, the CSDA one. If we could look at it and make some comments, and then perhaps at that point take a look and see whether it's worth bringing it to Bob at that point. And at that point, he will have also have worked on some of these things, and it may be more evident, especially on the HR front, what needs to be put into a manual and what doesn't. So I kind of agree with Director Natoli about trying to take an internal look with the CSDA model based on what we know of our own district, and then potentially turn it over to Bob if we feel like we need that. But we'll need less of his time and attention if we can give him the model with some notations, and then and at that point, he will also know our district even better, and could then look at that model with better eyes and more knowledge and help us with it.
So how do you visualize us doing that? Having a special meeting to do it, or a working group, or how do you see that happening?
I think Director Natoli has already done a lot of looking and working on this through the committee. I think all of us have access to this document, and we could feed anything we want to her, and she could present something to bring to Bob Dice potentially. What do you think about that?
It's a big burden on her if she's
Well,
willing
if
to do it.
if we all agree to the best of our ability, take a look at it as well.
Excuse me, if I may interject, that kind of exchange of views makes a violation of the Brown Act.
If it's one-way communication to Director Natoli?
I would advise against it.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate Director Welsh's comments that this is a very large job. It's easily underestimated, and taking a generic copy of something is a good starting point, but the amount of effort and work is, I've done this in 2 times, and let me just say that it took more than a year, and each one of them with professional staff working continuously on it. I don't think this one is that complicated, but I think there is a tendency to underestimate the amount of work. I also think part of the process does include public input, because some of the policies you decide are discretionary, and the public may want to have some input on those policies.
I was not trying to suggest there would not be public input. I'm sorry if anyone had that impression. I just was trying to get a product that we could consider and then give to Bob. I mean, I believe that revamping this policy and procedure manual is a very high priority. I'm concerned about budget implications here, especially since we really need to do a good examination of where we are at this point in the budget year. So I'm reluctant at this point to really, I'm a little reluctant to approve that much more work.
In light of all the other demands on our budget, I totally agree. The problem I have with taking our existing manual and try to correct some of the glaring problems on a piecemeal basis is always that issue of referencing back and making sure that you've caught all the references. My thought would be to take the CSDA manual, and what I had done initially was took all the separate electronic files and combined them into one single electronic file. There are a lot of policies that are irrelevant for our district, and I would eliminate those, start by eliminating those, and then comparing the CSDA against, if we do have an applicable provision, to see what the difference would be. But I am concerned with just giving a contract out on time and materials and even putting a dollar amount cap on it. You don't know how far they're going to get into that. And it may be that they spend $10,000 and we still don't have a draft that we would present to the public. So I do have a strong concern, and at least at the present time, I think let's see what we can do internally. I'll take on the laboring oar to try to take the manual, eliminate from those positions, those provisions that I think are irrelevant, and I'll keep a red line version so that we can see what was eliminated and then try to go out after it on that basis. But I'm just thinking we have the money that we need for the community service building. We've got a contract with the consultant to evaluate the police. We have these other 2 really important services that Bob Dice is proposing that we really need. I'm just concerned about all the money, and as Carl pointed out earlier, we do have some items that are going over budget, and I do appreciate the overtime that the police have put in, because I think when we can reveal what they've been working on overtime, it'll be something that the community will be very pleased with. But I am concerned about our budget.
I have a suggestion. How about we try it your way for a couple months, see what kind of progress we have, say by February sometime, and then make a decision at that point whether that process seems to be working or we need to, hand it off to Bob Dice.
I think also if you were able to eliminate those sections that don't pertain to us, and Bob could look at that item and then look at that and give us maybe a more solid sense of he could actually complete it with that limit or less or whatever, that might be a little bit better. Because having it open, like as Len said, we could end up with an incomplete project at that way. So if Director Natoli was able to provide Bob a draft of the CSDA manual minus sections that she felt were not relevant, and he could review that and then provide a proposal to complete it, that might be give us a little more comfort and more certainty.
Do you think that that would be acceptable to PMG, that we revisit item 3 in late January or early February?
Absolutely, and I think we do appreciate Director Natoli undertaking such a huge effort.
Yes, indeed.
Well, just removing
See
this.
how this side clammed up when that was suggested?
Could we think about when we'd like to have it done, so we could kind of have an idea of how long we want
Kind
to
of a
take? So it's
working-
not just we want to do it, but actually, we need to have it done by this date, and if it looks like after Eileen has looked at it and said, no, it's still going to be, a year of my time.
Well, Bob was estimating 60 days, so...
I mean, and for us, for the board, when...
No, but so I was suggesting we give it about 2 months for Eileen to take a crack at it, and if at that point we tender it over to Bob, it should still take 60 days or less, so that would add 2 months to it.
I think basically we would go ahead with the suggestion, but we would give him something to start with that would be better than anything we have right now, both our current manual and just the full CSDA without any look-see. So there's sort of a compromise there.
The other thing with Bob Dice is that some of the manual deals with what are good administrative practices, and he has the experience in those areas. He does not have, obviously, experience in the district. That's really the district's perspective.
Well, at this moment, we should make sure that we get any public comment that folks want to make. Please come to the microphone. And there's more cake.
Leonard Schwartzbird. Am I understanding that the writing of a draft would be entirely held by the board, perhaps with a hired consultant and by these folks? Or is there room for members of the public to be part of that process? Because we're talking about how labor intensive it is. And believe me, I understand, because I'm the principal author of the Policy and Procedures Manual of the American Academy of Psychotherapists. So I understand the process, and even think I might have something to contribute. So why not have a committee that would draw upon the community to help with that work?
I think we might look at that, but I think first we'd probably, the CSDA has...
The California Special District Association.
Yeah, sorry. They have a template that's probably 120 pages. Is it that long?
That's how many pages I wrote.
And it's already a very good starting point.
Yeah, so a lot of it is written, so we would probably, if we have community involvement, what we're thinking is, or Bob Dice involvement, that we put some good eyes on that template and give it, none of us have read it through in completion, so we don't know, so it would be a base. So I think that we probably would want to examine that before we knew whether or not, how we would either utilize Bob Dice or utilize the public.
Okay, if I can help, I'd be happy to.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
And I have another question, which is at a different level. Is the Policy and Procedures Manual a governing document, or is it advisory? And there's history to my question.
We know.
Council?
Could our legal counsel answer that question?
Perhaps you could go through the history to give.
Reconsider your question.
Hanukkah is only 8 nights.
Obviously, my own history with the district is far shorter than our esteemed speaker. However, I believe in practice, it's been taken as more of a guiding document, and some of them are observed more strictly than others, but in general, it's been more guidelines.
Well, I won't discuss that part of the matter, but I wanted to just present a little bit of history in terms of the attempt to revise these. And Linda Lipscomb and Tony Lloyd worked, what, 2 years? 2 years. And I attended one meeting, and, I mean, they were fine-tooth combing it, and they finally brought a product to the board. And the first section, which was employment maybe, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It seemed to me like that would be no question that, well, it was an improvement. The discussion, the argument, I guess I'll just say, it never did get decided whether to approve. It never was approved because there was so much dispute as to the whys and wherefores. And I guess if, you know, are you going to present the whole thing, take it or leave it, or are you going to go through section by section, which will take years to get approved? I mean, that's just a warning lesson there. Maybe, and it would help when you have a product that there be justification for a lot of the reasons why things are there, because I don't know whether that would have sold it better, but just for historical, the previous attempt just got bogged down in real divisions as to something that seemed like a fairly straightforward matter, and that was just the first, shortest of the 5 sections.
I do think this is where Bob Dice's expertise may come in handy, because I think he's got a very clear head about what these things mean in practice, and there is a benefit to having that expertise.
Well, that would be good, but, yeah, no, and that would be helpful, but I'd hate to spend however many cost plus, and then we still have that same problem of nobody's willing to.
I think the entire board has the motivation to change our P&P manual because we see the difficulty and the problems with it. And we also know that we are not in legal compliance on certain issues.
Okay.
And so those especially, which is also why we've focused on the CSDA, because the Special Districts Association monitors those
sorts
rules
of,
and
no, this is
laws
just a
that pertain to
historical
us.
warning of.
No, thank you.
It's not going to be, it may not be a slam dunk.
Thank you.
But even though you need it.
This may sound like a naive question, but I am wondering whether we may be putting the cart before the horse in some way with having DICE do a lot of work, because I think that the district really has to make a decision about what is going to happen with the police department, whether we improve the independent one that we have, or whether there is contracting that will take place. Some of the jobs that are currently done now will disappear or become much diminished. And
I think that's one of the weaknesses of this current P&P manual. It's written, there are many things in it that don't belong in it, and there are many things that are missing that that are important. And so it really shouldn't rest only on that question. There may be changes that have to happen, but I think we have imperatives that may, that can't wait that long.
I'm not so concerned about the policy and procedures manuals, because I really think those are definitely in need of improvement. I'm thinking of elaborate job descriptions, and what do we do about minutes? I see that nobody's taking minutes tonight. That's something that has to,
The
yeah.
minutes will be taken off the recording
Yeah.
this evening. I think you're referring to item 1. Actually, Mr. Dice is just really looking at the administrative side. So while there could be a reduction slightly, these are services that the district is mission to provide, whether or not our police services are in-house or not. So we still need a board secretary, and we still must have a general manager. And so this is really,
General
he's
manager.
not looking at the police services specialist category, or these are just jobs that provide the information for the running and administration of the department. Now, some of that does fall, the district, excuse me, that some of that does fall over in terms of, there might be other payroll solutions or things that happen.
Right.
But it's really
I'm just
administrative.
trying to weigh the cost of doing this study with the benefit to us, given that the final decision hasn't been made about what is going to happen with the.
Maybe our general manager wants to comment here, because these are things that are really key to the functioning of the district and the administration. He has encountered difficulties in the first 6 months of his work here.
Well, there's a number of functions that it's just simply devoid of anybody doing the work. And so the potential liability is huge, and it's caused liability problems. I think your question actually is well taken on the police. I think these positions, none of them would be full-time, and so they would all be less than full-time. And we would have to gauge how much time is really necessary, and so we would reduce the time of positions to the amount as needed. But the current administrative structure is really inadequate for the services that are required, both legally and professionally.
It just didn't make sense to me to have extensive job training for somebody, a staff person, who might not have a job in a couple of years, but perhaps.
No, there's plenty of work.
Yeah.
That won't be the case.
You're the professional, and I understand.
Gail Feldman. Yeah, I was hoping actually tonight you were going to have a little bit back up from what Bob had proposed and talk a little bit more, perhaps ask your general manager to really get into the nuts and bolts of some of the recommendations in the report, because my impression of the report was, in an ideal world, this is what you might need to do if you could do it. It sort of, to me, it was a little bit more Cadillac, or whatever you'd call it, Mercedes now, or then, yeah, Tesla, then perhaps what the district's in a position to do at this time, particularly in the regards to, I'm talking really about the positions. And so I would say that, you don't even know if you need them as positions or contractors. Obviously, there's certain functions that have to happen. And most of the things that Bob outlined, I would say, yeah, that's sort of like kind of basic to just have your ground operations. But one thing that I did disagree with, and maybe it's how he's framing it, is that you have a $3 million budget, and you do not need a CFO to run a $3 million budget. So there were just some things in there that I feel like you need a little more discussion with the general manager about. And so, I mean, before you would engage Bob or whoever to look at job descriptions, I think you really need to understand which things you really need as staff, employees, versus things that you might be able to contract out in similar ways that you're doing now, but perhaps by better defining what you would need from those contractors.
I think that's what this is part of. That's part and parcel of what he's doing. I mean, that's my understanding. It's not just job descriptions, it's looking at the functions and how we can deliver them, whether it's, and when he says it's not a full-time job, I think some of what Tony's saying is these are maybe contractors.
Well, I'm just.
But that wasn't express, and I had the same thought, that some of these, what he should be doing, and it wasn't expressly laid out, is he should be recommending to us that you can have this function. For example, the payroll. Here are several organizations that could handle payroll for you.
That's an example. And so I guess I would say before you would vote on something like this, that you want to go back and ask your general manager to be a little more clear, and maybe the consultant goes back and does a little bit more work in a proposal to you before you actually vote on engaging somebody. That would just be where I came from.
Tony, do you think there's room there for a board member with you, to talk to Bob and clarify some of the discrepancies that we may see in terms of our operation?
Sure, absolutely. I will say that this is not a Cadillac report. This is rudimentary services. And keep in mind, I'm part-time too. I've actually been working more than 2 days a week, which was the original intent.
I'm deeply concerned about this issue of what is the function of the Policies and Procedures Manual, and what is it basically, whether it's a governing document or whether it is guidelines. And my concern is based on history. I don't want to get into it and make divisive statements or anything like that, but I think that there has to be something that governs those who govern. And if there isn't something, if it's not the Policy and Procedures Manual, what is it? What is it that governs these 5 folks in terms of what you may do, what you must do? And
Well, all legal, I mean, we must follow the law that pertains to special districts and our creation, county law. So that is the governing principle under which we operate. I think the current policy and procedure manual has operated as guidelines. Sometime I would like to have a policy and procedure manual that we could confidently be governed by, but that document is not yet in existence. And because of the contradictions and difficulties with the current document, it would not be wise for us to act under its auspices, assuming that we were compliant with the law.
there is an approach which Len and I discussed very early on, shortly after you were appointed to the board. And an approach could be that there is a procedure that can govern the need for a variance from the policies and procedures, so that there isn't just an ad hoc decision being made, but if there is a feeling that the policies and procedures are confusing or whatever, that a procedure be initiated that would allow for them to be functioning as guidelines, but not governing in a particular case. But then that would require that the board explain why they're varying from the policies and procedures. So there could be built-in a built-in procedure for varying from the policies and procedures if it was felt to be necessary. And if it is felt to be necessary, y'all better be able to explain that.
Well, that makes sense. I think it will be more timely to replace our P&P manual and then have it with improvements, because there are so many areas right now, given that everything is required a second reading, at least 2 readings, and we just...
Well, I'm not worried about you folks. You know, I'm not, and that's not the reason. There's principle here, and we have very good reason to be concerned in terms of history.
Thank you. Understood. Please.
Well, Eileen, Linda Lipscomb here. You're taking on quite a bit. As Mabry Benson stated before, I had the unfortunate duty, and unfortunate, I would say, had both qualities of looking at the existing policy manual, which has everything in it from job descriptions and letters of employment, things that ordinarily I wouldn't expect to find in a policy and procedure manual, but nevertheless were there. I think the proposal to use a professional to sort this out in a top-down way and adapting it to our specific procedures is a good thing. I don't think $30,000 for it, based on the amount of time that we put in for 2 years, meeting really just about every 2 weeks, utilizing the good services of Barbara Diltz and others. I don't think $30,000 is by any means out of line. I think it's cheap to get that done, to do that much work. Just my opinion. And I also think that you're going to find that you have to have a large amount of meetings with personnel, someone from management now, and the general manager says he's working part-time. Well, he's going to have to be at those meetings, because I found myself turning around to the general manager, chief of police, and saying, how do you do that? How do you actually do that here? Because it was no good to have a policy or a procedure that was CSDA, and it's something we never do. And then, as you, Rochelle, said, the backstop is the law. You can't write a policy and procedure on how to present a complaint if the law says what you have to do is tender it first to the district within 90 days, and you have a law that says that. The policy and procedure manual is a manner of proceeding, but it is not law. There are occasions where it intersects with law, and there are currently many sections of it which need to comply with law. So I don't think that the proposal that's being made is way out of line. Just my opinion, and having worked on it for a long time, in good faith, within its then framework, and finding it very difficult. And I don't know that it's particularly appropriate, and this is almost somewhat Kensington heresy. I don't know how appropriate it is to have community involvement in the crafting of administrative policy. It seems to me that is a professional sphere, and that the engagement of a professional is the appropriate place to put it. We never had the budget for it, and we went at it ourselves, and there was considerable acrimony and rancor when we brought up any given change in the policy and procedure manual. So I'd suggest to you that putting it with a professional at what seems to me to be a reasonable price removes a lot of the hot spots from past practice, and as long as that person works closely with actual policy and actual procedure, that it could be very successful.
It sounds like someone who's been through this is probably somebody we should listen to.
I'm tending to agree now.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to say, thank you. I came into it rather nervous about the cost for item 3, but no, we have it, no, but I'm very nervous about the cost. But I have to say, Linda and Len's thinking and erudition of this subject makes me think that perhaps we do want to let Bob take a look at this.
Yeah, I think the question really is, can he look at the CSDA manual? If there's any way, Eileen, you have a week or 5 days just to cross out things that he shouldn't, that we think are not, just to show him this is what we think doesn't work, and he could come back with a more firm proposal that says, I will give you a P&P manual based on this for this amount by this time, because this is still a little too amorphous. He said it would be not to exceed 10K on the time and materials, but I don't see that written here anywhere.
No, that's what he was.
That's Tony's suggestion.
Oh.
Suggest to him.
Okay, well, all right, I think I've been convinced. Thank you, Linda.
Well, there are two issues here, just want to be clear. One is having the community participate in the drafting, which I think would be a huge stake. Certainly, it should be presented to the community when it's getting to the point of being a product. That's what would really bog it down, and that's what bogged it down in the past. The other thing, I have no problem with Eileen's suggestion that maybe she spends a month or two just seeing what she can do with it, getting it ready for submission to Bob. That could cut down the amount of work he needs to do. I think, Eileen, you've already done some work on it. So I personally have no problem with taking a month or two to see what you can come up with, and then we move it on to Bob.
Okay.
Does that seem good? All right. Then what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of General Manager Constantoros and engage Bob Dice to develop job descriptions, titles, and labor market compensation, review district human resource practices and policies, and provide staff training, and at a later date, update the board's policy and procedure manual with an initial limit of $10,000, and that we appoint Director Natoli to work with Bob Dice on item 2 to define possible deviance or discrepancies between his suggested job titles and the way the district actually operates, and on providing information and direction for the development of the policy and procedures manual along with General Manager Constantoros.
I have a couple of questions, sorry. Just on one, the language at the very bottom of the page is a little unclear. Consultants will work closely, your staff and consultants, to ensure their opinions. What exactly is that saying?
I thought it meant with your...
With your staff and consultants, and with the board members as well, or are the board members involved in that?
I'm sorry, would you tell me what page?
It's the bottom of the plan of work, number 1, new job descriptions, page 42, as it's numbered with pencil.
It's actually between my copy, it's on between pages 42 and 43. Consultants will work closely with your staff. It should read with your staff and consultants
Right,
to
so
ensure their opinions and questions are heard. But you're asking, what about board involvement? I
Exactly.
agree, it would be nice to have some board input here.
right.
I understand.
Okay, and my only concern with number 2 is that if we don't have an HR department or person, who's going to
Yeah.
make sure that all the training is really, well, or the behavior past the training is, behavior is probably not the right word, but it seems like training is kind of only part of the problem. I mean, the problem is we don't have HR staff
We
person.
don't have the HR function, and
Right.
so his reorg should include some way to make sure we have regular HR, either it's trainings or someone to provide that function, whether that's, through the outside service or, because this is where we talked about in the past that it tends to run to council, which is a ridiculously expensive way of dealing with HR issues.
Well, I think that's part of item 1, but go ahead.
Well, it is included in his proposal, it says there'll be training component offered to staff. The important thing, and I appreciate the question really, is that it's ongoing. You can't have training one time and then it's over. It's got to be an ongoing process. The initial training is only to get it off the ground and get it organized.
Well, I think it's also worth exploring ways to provide HR services to the district, whether that's through
Right.
another entity or,
Right. I mean, the point is that those things have to be done, and so he's going to help us figure out the most effective way to get them done.
All right, there's a motion.
No, I don't need it. The recording does. Just one contribution on that score. I have always felt, and you surely have noticed, that there is a paucity of support staff in the district. You probably need some additional staffing. We always found we were our own clerks, our own secretaries when I was on the board, and did a tremendous amount. Thank God for people like Barbara Diltz and others who participated at no compensation, but we can't rely on that, I think. We need to have some staffing, and I hope that's able to be put into the mix here.
Thank you.
Well, there's a motion pending, right? I second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes noes, I guess, I'm sorry, noes, opposed. I'm sorry, the motion passes, the motion passes 5-0. And we give a lot of work to Vice President Natoli, so I'm sorry. All right, we're now moving on to new business. We're moving on to page 68. This is an extension of Interim Chief of Police Ricky Hull's employment agreement. And Ann, would you like to introduce this?
Of course. The current interim chief of police contract is due to expire this month, as the board knows. Given that we are in a time of analysis and consideration of alternatives, it seems prudent to maintain status quo in management until we have more answers about the long-term future of Kensington's Police Department. Therefore, staff is recommending that we further extend interim chief of police Hull's contract for another 6 months. I would like to point out, and a thank you goes to Eileen, the vice president, that there's a mistake in the date. It should be that it will run until June 30, 2018, not May 17, 2018. Other than the dates, the substantive changes in this agreement really relate to the fact that there are now separate general manager and chief of police positions. So I've removed the tasks and responsibilities that are proper to the general manager and left those that are proper to the chief of police, and also clarify that the chief of police is subordinate to the general manager, and that's expressly stated in the general manager's contract. So with that, I would, if there are no questions, I would recommend that the board consider the agreement, take public comment, and if they so decide, authorize the board president to negotiate and execute the document.
I just want to point out that the incorrect date appears only in the background and staff analysis. It does not appear in the contract as it is listed. I had a question about longevity pay was not listed specifically in this contract.
I'm not sure where that was mentioned in the other contract. This is essentially the same as the original
And it may
contract.
appear and be executed simply under the fact that we are following the additional benefits under the POA.
I believe as Master Sergeant,
Okay, only there.
Chief Hull would be entitled to those benefits.
Clothing allowance and safety equipment. Let me see, dental vision.
Where are we? All other terms.
I think it should appear under item 9. I think that was the only.
It's not deferred compensation.
No, it's not deferred compensation. Longevity is specifically listed.
I will add that in.
So I believe that should be added. It's a current benefit. All right, are there any comments? Go ahead, or
Public or
questions?
board first? Or?
You're welcome to.
Okay, item 1C, general manager shall have the authority to this agreement. Is that,
There's a problem there.
yeah.
Something's missing.
To enter into, I think.
That is a typo. It should say that you'll have the authority to supervise the interim chief of police pursuant to this agreement. I am sorry. Right, should be exercise the district's authority with respect to this agreement.
Should have the authority to
Exercise.
exercise the district's authority.
No, the district's duties and obligations. Wait, I had this wording before. duties and responsibilities.
Of the district?
Yes.
Sorry, can you read that whole sentence then?
The general manager shall have the authority to exercise the district's duties and responsibilities under this ordinance.
Districts.
Under this agreement.
Under what? Under this agreement?
It's authority and responsibilities?
Duties and responsibilities.
Duties and I'm so sorry. Duties and responsibilities. All right. Under this agreement. All right. Public comment? All right. Seeing as there's none, I would like to say a huge thank you to Chief Hull, who has willfully and cheerfully put up with us. Worked very hard to bring the best policing service to the district. And so I recommend that I move that we accept this contract for interim chief of police employment agreement with the following changes: that item 1C shall read, the general manager shall have the authority to exercise the district's duties and responsibilities under this agreement, and that under item 9, in the list of benefits to be received, we add longevity pay.
I second the thank you and the motion.
All right. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Yes?
Noes? Well, the motion passes 5-0, so thank you. You have the full confidence of the board, and we appreciate your service. So, yay for you. All right. Moving on, Director Debbie is going to provide an update on the status of our technology. This is on page 74. Take it away.
Okay. Before I joined the board, the current board entered into an agreement with a company called Streamline to move the website into a more modern, ADA compliant, legal compliant system. And I was asked to help finish that process and bring it up to being live. And so I've been working on that for the last couple of months, I think, along with some help. And this is just an update on where it stands, and I guess you can read it, but I'll go through each item as they are. So the originally the planned date was going to be January 1st of 2018. I'm proposing that the live date is on the 11th for the board meeting. I can give a demo of the new website, one that gives me a little more time to make some changes because it is a lot of work. And there's going to be some what's called redirects of the old domain and the new domain, and that's kind of complicated, and I'd rather not be working on New Year's Eve fixing any bugs that I introduce. So I'd rather be doing that on the 10th or so. There's also some training that's going to have to happen with some of the new ways of posting agendas and recordings that I'll need to work with Lynn on. So anyway, I'd rather just wait until the 11th. I always hate to delay a release, but I think the 11th is a much better time. And again, I can demo the website here just to explain how things work. So as long as everybody's happy with that, I think that's the best idea. There's going to be a new domain called KPPCSD.org. Both the website and actually our email addresses are going to change to that as well, which is a lot easier to type for us, and it's just a little clearer about what we are. In fact, do you have the logo that?
I do have it.
So we do have a new logo, and it also, the KPPCSD is in the logo, so the whole thing comes together a lot better, and you'll see that when you see the website. It's very nice logo. I think it's going to be on the cards as well. And that was one of the volunteers that you talked about.
Michelle Zatkoff designed this for free for us. and gave it to us in a variety of formats so that we can use it. This is not superseding or changing the police officer's logo. That still belongs to the KPD, but this is for the district and the administrative side.
We should have a garbage.
Oh, good. That's our next logo 2.0. We'll have a garbage truck.
Right, yeah, yeah. And once the site is live, any request to KensingtonCalifornia.org will be redirected to the KPPCSD.org. I'm going to keep the old site, number 4. So when you type in KensingtonCalifornia.org or KPPCSD.org, it'll go to the new site as of the 11th, give or take some hours, given the domain name changes that have to happen through the system. The new site, I've been working a lot on it, but there's still going to be some rough spots. But I thought we had to just pick a date and go forward. So there's going to be some comments that you can send once it's live about what would you like, and we'll still consider those. It's controlled by what's called a content management system, and that means that the look and feel is largely controlled by a template. We can put things into the template, but we can't wholesale make changes to how individual pages look, which reduces a lot of the work, but also produces some inflexibility. So I think it's a very nice look and feel. I think everybody likes it. But there's not going to be an opportunity to, I want this one page to look totally different. That's just not possible. And that's sort of a good and bad thing. But I think in general, good. We can concentrate on the content and the structure and not worry about moving pixels around. So I think that'll help with the work as well and reduce the workload for the staff. Again, the old site will be kept live for probably a couple of months. So if we're missing something, we can always refer back to that site and move it into the new site. There'll be a link on the new site to go look at the old site. There'll be an email address again to send comments about, are you missing this, you're missing that. Hopefully after a couple of months we can take the old site down completely and make an archive of it locally, so if we did forget something, we can still bring it across. The content and the structure, I try to design it to best represent what the KPPCSD does. It's not really meant to be a site for all of Kensington, and this may be a little controversial, but they're calling it Kensington, California, I think represents that we are sort of the be-all and end-all for Kensington, and there's a lot of things that go on in the city, in the community that our board doesn't have control over, and it's best that we represent that. There was, the Contra Costa County is thinking of restricting and producing some regulations on short-term rentals, Airbnbs, for instance, and they've reached out to the KMAC to help them get community input, and the Kensington Property Owners Association did a survey and got some feedback, and they presented it. And I use this as an example because we've got on our old site a page for the KPOA that we've probably just been up there forever, but it didn't mention the survey, it didn't mention this Airbnb regulations, and I'm not saying that's anybody's fault, but that's an example of we try to do a little bit for the KPOA, but because we don't maintain it, it was actually inaccurate information. So I'd rather have what's on the site up to date and accurate and something that we can maintain. So that's what the structure is going to hopefully reflect. There's always room for suggestions about adding things, but I really tried to make it such that, of course. And I'm trying to move all the documents as far as I can into PDF versions. Like right now, we've got a PDF searchable version of the ad hoc committee report, the final report. The matrix proposal now is in a searchable PDF. And I'd like it that any new content that comes onto the site, the new site, if at all possible, is searchable PDF, and that includes agendas, any other reports that we get. And I'm willing to help the staff, Lynn, whoever, show them how to make that happen. If there's a lack of expertise, I'm willing to help them make it happen. I really think that anything going forward needs to be textual so you can search for it. The site has a search function that if you put a document up, it automatically indexes it and has some nice search results, but it doesn't work if we've got scanned copies of things. So I really think we need to have searchable PDFs. And in fact, I think it's in, 2019 that our agendas have to be that way, so we really should be moving forward in that direction. Finally, there's some links right now to external sites, and this is probably the most controversial. For instance, the KIC has its own page on our site. It's a very minimal page. KPOA also has a page. And I would prefer that if they had their own sites, we could link to them, and then they could be responsible for maintaining the content. Right now, it's very stale content. No one keeps it up. And there's the question, should we be the owners of the KIC and the KPOA, and I don't know what the ham radios and the fly fishers, and not that you're the same as those. I know it's more important, but we have to make a decision what we do and what we don't do. I think we have to focus on our core responsibilities and try not to do too much and almost pretend that we are providing the website infrastructure for other groups when in fact we're not. So it's probably needs some board discussion about.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and in fact, it's much, much easier now than it ever used to be to put up a website for groups.
Right.
And, I was able to do it, so if anyone can do it, I think it's much different than it used to be. And I think it is more in keeping with best practices and professional for the district to just do that and not carry, extraneous things.
So I think we can provide links. We have to decide who we link to. And I say something about the links should really be apolitical. I think you have to be careful. If someone created a group, Kensington's for Trump, and another one created a group, Kensington's to impeach Trump, we don't want to get into linking to those. So I think we have to really be strict about if we link to a group, it's a non-political group, so we're not accused of a bias or approving or favoring one group over another. So. That brings to my final point. I really think we need a social media steering committee to decide what goes on the website. So it's not just one person saying, yeah, let's put it up. It's really a considered decision about what goes on the website, what the format is. We have a Facebook
That's
account.
really a staff function, though.
No, I think what Chris is talking about is a policy, and what I'm thinking about,
Yes.
Linda, is KIC has a policy, for example, of what announcements can go on the board at Arlington, and that may be an appropriate policy to follow here.
Something like that,
Yeah.
right. I don't think you can just have someone decide on their own what goes on the website without some, at least, policy behind it. Maybe if we can come up with a policy, then we could have a staff that would follow the policy. But right now, there's no, obviously, policy. And again, we have a Facebook account and a Twitter account. And I think the Facebook is mainly just a police Facebook account. It's advertised as the district's account, but it seems to be more geared towards the police. And so we might want to look at, does the district have its own account and the police have its own account? And obviously we have a Twitter account. As we know, Twitter tends to be kind of an official statement platform for certain people in this country. So we have to be careful with that. So that's why I think we need to have a conscious decision about, almost like a communications director in a way, but at least a steering committee to discuss what goes on our social media platforms. Now, Flyman, yes.
Oh, come to the microphone, sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's your.
I'm wondering if changes in the net neutrality will impact our website and how it functions for people. You may not know the answer to this. I'm just wondering if that's something we need to look at and be concerned about, because if people are going there to download information, from what my understanding is that's one thing where different ISPs will charge different amounts for different types of access.
Well, we pay just a flat monthly rate for the website, so I don't think it would change our cost. It might slow things down, I'm not sure, but.
That was the question.
Right. We have a monthly fee, I'm assuming, from what I've seen from the budget of.
The question is how it might impact not just the website,
Right.
people coming to it, depending on.
We don't know.
Well, I know that. That's why I'm raising this question. It's
Okay.
something to look at.
Will be long gone, probably. Hi. I had a question. In all of the research that I've done over the years, I've looked at different websites at at different cities and towns, and some of them are more transparent than others. Some of them it's very easy to find, for example, an MOU. Others you can't find it until you dig and dig and dig. And so my question is, in terms of the organization of this website, what's been done for transparency and for, you know, the organization of it? Did anybody look at what's been done on other sites, like where Tony worked has a great website, as I recall. So have you done anything with that? Looked at what other cities have done, how they organized it, how you find documents?
I've looked at some other cities. What I tried to do was look at, we've got something called Google Analytics and some other stats about what documents people look for. They're ranked about who looks for what, and I tried to make, and I'm still working on that actually, but the most commonly looked at documents in the last 6 months, I want to make sure those are the ones that are the easiest to find and the clearest to find. So that's more, we did look at some other cities. This is a company that's geared specially towards special districts, and so they're really set up to make it easy to find information that you might want to find on a special district's website. But as far as our specific case, I'm still using the website stats that Google Analytics gives us to determine, okay, these are the most important documents. This is what everybody is looking for. I want to make sure that those are front and center and very clear and very easy to find. But again, it'll be a process. I'm sure it's not going to be perfect the first time, so that's why I said we need to get it out and start getting public input. And people say it's really hard to find this document, then we change it and we make it easier. The search function should help. And again, if we could have searchable PDFs, then if you want to find something, you can type in the title or some text and it immediately show where it is. I think that will help as well.
It'll make a huge difference.
Yes.
Well, and as Director Deppie gave me a preview last week, and it's amazing. It's improved clarity, improved findability, if that's a, but there was, as you were building, it actually took you to a page, you were showing me, that had all the items that said transparency, and it gave you a listing of every document that needed to be there in order to provide transparency. And they were all there, or you explained to me why it was not showing on the function at the time, but we were fulfilling the criteria.
That's a function of their site, actually. I didn't even need to create the page. We just say, show us a transparency page, and they have all the links and where you're supposed to find it, so that really helps. Yes.
Yeah.
It's called Streamline is the company.
It's a company called Streamline.
So the question was, is there a template for special districts, right? Just so it's on the recorder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Now, the structure as far as the menus and how we segment it, that's up to us, but the transparency report, they generate that dynamically on the fly. We don't do that. And there's actually, there's a transparency as far as the documents. There's also a transparency dashboard that we can look at, and they rate us on how we are doing for the CSD transparency checklist, so that really helps as well.
David Bergen. First of all, I want to thank Chris because I have seen the website as well, and it's really very nicely done. There's a nice photograph in the background too. A question: who's going to be the webmaster?
I would assume me for a while. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And to the point of what gets linked and all that, I would assume that the webmaster would have a say in that.
Well, I think this should be that's what the committee, I think, should decide, really.
But basically,
I don't want one person to be saying, yes, this group gets it and this group doesn't. That's why I think a committee should be more appropriate. And there's still options for public comment and suggestions. So.
Very good. Well, thank you for doing all that.
Yes, thank you very much,
I know.
Chris.
No, you won't believe the number of hours when you just took me through this short demo, and I thought, oh, it took you off the committee, less glory and more work for you. So.
I just haven't told my partners about what I've been doing. So.
Oh, okay. So do we have any willing victims, volunteers, I mean, to serve on this ad hoc committee with Director Deppie? Can we form an ad hoc? Are we, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Who is comfortable, who has free hours? Any volunteers?
Social media stuff? Yes, I'm happy to help on that.
Okay, so,
The part of public outreach, which I feel very passionate about too, trying to knit the community together and find ways to do that. And I really value our community groups, and I really want to encourage community involvement in Friends of the Kensington Library and KIC. These groups need some new blood, and we need to get our folks, knowing about them and finding ways to serve. So I'm happy to help.
okay. So I'm going to move that, or I don't have to move, we can just appoint, right? So general consensus that Director Debbie and Director Hasai form our technology committee? Hooray, okay.
Social media steering.
Social media steering committee. All right, then we'll move on to item 10C. Vice President Tully?
All right, this is in your agenda packet, and it looks like it's page 77. And it's late. I'm not going to read it to you. And you can see we've done a lot. End of story. Thank you.
Any highlights?
I think the tremendous amount of work. The two things I do want to highlight, the recycling guide for Kensington residents that is currently page, oh goodness, 81 and 82. That will appear on our website. It's a elegant little table that Eileen put together. And also page 83 and 84 show the new rates for 2018. As long as those have been approved by our general manager, they will take effect January 1st. So the current rate, of a once a week 32 gallon can is going to increase from $44.30 to $45.65 a month. So then you can see, based on what other garbage service you may have, what the changes in the rate structure will be. There's also a comparison of garbage rates with local cities, and you'll note that our backyard service is worth $15.21 a month, and we do have unlimited green waste. So there's a bit of apples and oranges here, but I'll leave it to you to look for further discussion. Any other questions, or?
I just want to comment, Eileen has done an awful lot of work getting her arms around a fairly, what's the word, Byzantine and difficult to understand set of issues, and I really appreciate the work she's done and the relationship she's developed with various players out there.
I want to second that too. I'm very impressed and appreciative of the work, and I know it's clarified a lot of things for us about the contract and for our residents too.
And I also must comment that Len has done a tremendous amount of work on this issue as well, behind the scenes. With none of the glory, Len, none of the glory. So, thank you too, though, because you gave a lot of knowledge and helped out in meetings.
Eileen's the one who's done the heavy lifting, let's get that straight.
Well, she's in position to come pick up our trash cans. Just a question, either a month or two ago, there was some comment that El Cerrito Recycling's not taking some sorts of the hazardous waste. Is that reflected in your little table here, or
Yes.
they
and you
change the rules all the time? And
No, they didn't change the rules. El Cerrito is part of a joint power agreement. Kensington, when it was formed, chose not to join it. And as an accommodation, El Cerrito took compact fluorescent bulbs from Kensington residents because they had an unwritten agreement with the county that the county would reimburse them for their cost. Then the county stopped reimbursing them. And so El Cerrito stopped taking compact fluorescent bulbs from Kensington residents as of July of this year. We worked with Kate Roush, and who works for John Joya, our county supervisor. And the problem was that the person that was supposed to write the contract at the county left. And so it's like that old saying, but for the horseshoe, we lost the war. So they didn't write a contract, and El Cerrito stopped. So Kate Roush has been terrific to contact the county. They'll get a contract with El Cerrito Recycling. The issue, though, is El Cerrito is owed $6,000 for past costs, and Kate's going to try to get that money paid because it wasn't clear to me that El Cerrito would be willing to start a new contract without getting reimbursed for their past cost. Now, that's what they'll take. Because we're not part of the Joint Powers Agreement, Kensington residents cannot take any materials that would be classified as hazardous waste to the El Cerrito Recycle Center for disposal. But there's an awful lot of material that if you take it for recycling, it's not subject to regulation as hazardous waste disposal. So for example, the little alkaline batteries, you could take those to El Cerrito. Otherwise, you'd need to take them to the Richmond Household Hazardous Waste Facility. There's also, they'll accept electronic waste, and some electronic waste would be classified as hazardous waste if it was disposed. So that kind of stuff you can take to El Cerrito. Paint can be taken in the original container with the label to Kelly Moore. They're part of the recycle of paint, liquid paint. If it's dried paint, you can throw that out in your normal garbage. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, I was noticing some of these and like the batteries, well, I would think they're semi-hazardous, but okay, that explains it. So it is as accurate as you could make it at this point.
Yeah, and this should be an insert in our December invoice.
Oh.
And it'll also be on the website. And this was actually Dr. Delk's idea to put together an insert. I made it into a table format because I'm a table format reader rather than a narrative paragraph.
Well, it certainly knows it helps to know what you can do with what, because every jurisdiction's different. So,
right.
Thank you.
Right. And on that same note, Bayview is, we're pushing Bayview to come to a decision on this, but they have said that it's maybe possible for them to have a quarterly pickup of household hazardous waste. But frankly, with El Cerrito Recycling Center taking e-waste and taking fluorescent bulbs and taking alkaline batteries, car batteries, used oil and other things, I'm not sure what hazardous waste our residents would really have. But rather than need to schlep all the way out to Richmond, he's talking about having a quarterly service where you could make an appointment and they'll pick up hazardous waste from your home.
Yeah, I think that may be mostly a matter of just getting the word out. I think people don't really understand that, and once they do, it could really solve a lot of the perceived problem.
Yeah, I can talk to Linnea about putting something in the Outlook.
Eileen, so the El Cerrito Recycling Center takes computers and peripheral equipment?
Right.
Not that I ever have any.
All right, yeah.
They do, but they often have folks waiting to come in, so if you have any confidential or...
Oh, I destroy everything.
Okay.
For that, actually, and I don't know if people have used it, but I recently had to get rid of a bunch of old zip disks and everything from clients, and I went to the automatic response systems on the East Shore Freeway, and they're really, really good. They'll destroy just about anything.
And I have that somewhere on
Yes,
this
you do,
list.
yes. I saw that, yeah. And you can get, I saw people bringing in bags of paper just for $2 or $3, they'll shred Yeah. Right, yeah, it's really handy, yeah.
Yeah, so if you miss the shredding events, that's a bit different than computer waste. Oh, please.
I wanted to say one other thing. I appreciate the care that you took with this. I did it with Len in the last one, and I know it's a bear. And I especially want to emphasize how important it is in this community to have unlimited green waste collection. The hillside, we're interface from Tilden Park. If we didn't have that, people would not trim back to the extent they do. It is so important, and to preserve that is worth a tremendous, I mean, it might even be worth the price of the town in helping to preserve defensible space. So I really, really appreciate that.
I thought of that very thing when I put away 6 or 7 bags this weekend. I was thinking about that.
Exactly, and for our elderly, people that, you know, and disabled people, to be able to go into the backyard and get the trash. I really feel it's not, it might be worth a little article about what goes into the making of a contract like that, to go into the Outlook so people understand how important it is,
And if
those
you,
features.
the rates, we have the unlimited, as you point out, but El Cerrito and Albany are limited to 64 gallons on a weekly basis. And I sometimes have 7 to 9 containers.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we had those limitations, people would not clean out major problems, so much appreciated.
Oh, well, stay there, Linda, because I do have to say thank you to you and Len, because to get up to speed on the solid waste, I felt I was behind. Eileen and I met and went over, and in preparation, I reread that solid waste contract. And I have to say, well done to past board members, because it's a very nice contract, and we have a lot of services that are packed in there, some of which we discovered we're really not utilizing in the way that we should. So thank
Right.
you.
You're
And
welcome.
it's a lot of years for us to not have to deal with that as a board. So, all right. We now move on to item D. For 2018, the board is now going to select a president and vice president for the coming calendar year.
Well, just for that, thank you.
What?
Rochelle, I'm going to nominate you for president.
And I'll second.
And I don't get time to say anything.
Nobody wants to
No.
work that hard.
Well, before you can.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
And I will like to nominate Eileen, who's done a stellar job on this and many other things, to continue to assist Rachel as much as, you know, Rachel is fond of saying that it's very equal, and her role as president doesn't put her above anyone else, and she's shared information, and Eileen as well. But I think that there is a lot of work involved, and as much as we all would like to share that burden, I think that when you have a well-oiled machine, it's worth keeping it going.
And I second the motion.
All right. All in favor of Vice President Natoli, remaining Vice President Natoli? Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? No. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you. You guys make it easy.
I'll make a motion. Should I adjourn? Obviously.
You didn't get a chance. Sorry, no one got a chance. We should have had for public comment there.
Oh, no. Well, out of the agenda, a lot of cake left, and maybe the policemen and the firemen would enjoy it.
Yes, but I'm sure that if anyone wants to carve a slice for,
Home.
2 a.m., please, stay home. We have
Breakfast.
plates and napkins. And
Make a
then we will
motion to
send
adjourn the
rest.
meeting?
Yes, we'll make a motion to adjourn
Second.
the, oh, go ahead.
Say one thing.
Sure, please do.
I want to express my appreciation and my admiration for the enormity of the job that you've taken on. It's so clear today how much work has been needed, and you guys have really jumped in and you're doing it. And My heartfelt thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment, Mr. Schwartzberg. And now I will motion to adjourn the meeting.
All in
Second.
favor? Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All right. We'll adjourn. We'll be back January 11th in the new year. Have a safe and happy holiday, whichever you celebrate, and Happy New Year.